Right, here we go. Should be streaming. Let's see. So I just played this game on chess.com and I was super instructive because what I did is I copied a game from the reference database in one of the positions. I'll show it to you guys in a little bit. Right, this one right here, Cosma versus Furtus Gary, whatever. 20. I love it when you have a mismatch, like a 2500 rated player playing a low rated player, like someone in their low 2000s, because it's really instructive. Some themes like where people can go wrong, how they get punished, etc. So I'll show you guys this game. I pasted it in, but first I'll show you the game that I played that led to that position. So here I was white. This is my bread and butter. I find this really gets a lot of people into trouble really early on when I played in tournaments. They don't know how to play this as black. So for example here, if they took, then I get into a reverse Grunfeld, and this can really pose black some troubles early on if they like, because basically playing a Grunfeld but with reverse color. I mean, yeah, reverse colors Grunfeld. Hard for black to hold on to the pawn setter. I'm gonna rip it to shreds with like c4, etc. Of course, black should objectively be all right, but yeah. Anyways, but they often defer it. I find this happens a lot. I mean, they don't take on d4. And so I've been looking at ways for white to play in these positions. Like just yesterday, over the board, I was playing some blitz, and this 2200 plus guy pulled this out as black. Of course, not bishop f5. Mostly I see e6, after which there's a few different ways for white to continue. I used to play c4, which is good, but then I've been looking at d takes c5, although I'm not sure if it's here or later after c4. I think it's after c4. The idea is, oh man, or do I play d takes c5? See, this is I have some prep here. Let me open up the prep. This is a good chance for me to review and try to remember it. This is the prep for the other line after when they play. Yeah, see when they play e6, I have a different a PGN in the database for this line. So here, do I have any alternatives? Let's see. No, it seems c4. I'm sticking with c4, but there's a place where I make a change. So I used to, right here, if they play d takes c4, my old theory used to go, I play queen a4, which gives me a decent position. But here I realized I can actually play d takes c5. And the idea being, let's say, takes, I go knight, I think I go, yeah, trade the queens. Or what happens? No, they don't take, don't, they trade queens for some reason. Yeah, because they want to be able to castle or whatever, I guess. They don't want me taking the queen on d8. So they takes, bishop takes, and here I play knight d2, and they sack the pawn on c3. And this somehow actually looks like white has a decent position, according to the engine even. I used to think the c pawn would be weak because it's isolated on a semi-open file like this. But it turns out, like after knight b3, I can push c4, c5 in some lines, take control of dark squares with bishop a3 or bishop b2, and it seems like a decent position for white to play. So I'm going to try this line. Going back here to what I really want to show you. So here, they didn't play e6, they played bishop f5. Now here I was on my own because I didn't really know what to do, but I knew c4 had to be a move because it's a similar position to the other line I showed with e6 instead here. Should be similar, right? And turns out, yeah, like theory says c4 is good. But then I checked later with the database and engine and stuff. As d takes c5 is also good, and it's ranked lower than c4 here. But I'm gonna stick with d takes c5 in the future because I feel like black it can get easily rolled over because they're not going to get that pawn back, most likely, right? For example, it's very tricky the way white holds onto that c5 pawn. For example, if they play e5, they're already going wrong. Yeah, they have to play e6 because now this pawn center is very kind of tender. I'm trying to think what I play here. I think I play c4 probably. Yeah, like let's say if they play here, then I'm looking for ways to play b4, and it often works because now that d4 has been played, this bishop is open, which means like let's say the knight takes here, I can play queen a4, and if knight goes back, I can take on e5. And you see how tempting the black pawn center forward really just opened up a lot of light square weaknesses. So already black is in trouble. And if they don't play d4, I mean, what else can they do, right? Like if they go e5, already the center looks more and more tenuous. I think I would probably play knight h4 and then take on d5. It can't be bad, although I'd have to find the exact continuation of the engine. Let's see what the engine suggests. Okay, it says knight d4. Um, Knight h4 is also good. I think knight d4, this is one of those tricky ways of holding onto the c5 pawn that I mentioned earlier, but I was thinking of it in relation to other lines. The idea is that often you play knight d4, knight takes, and then when your queen ends up on d4, you end up guarding the c5 pawn. This is just a good position for white, good central presence. So yeah, it's like after e5, how is black holding on to all this stuff, right? If you try something like bishop takes c5, I'm guessing I would probably take on d5, and then if knight takes, it just seems like all these pieces are so loose. c5, d5, f5. I'm not sure what exactly I would do, but it just looks really... Can I even take on e5 right now? Yeah, take on e5, and then this is hanging. Yeah, it's just too loose. And one more thing, what if queen takes? I'm actually curious. But I think it's the same thing as trade queens and take on e5. Everything is just too loose here. Yeah. So e5 already cannot be played. Then they have to play e6. But in this case, this is where I was talking about how you can kind of really trickily defend the c5 pawn with a move like this, knight d4. Idea being if the knight takes, then the queen ends up on d4, guarding everything. Good central presence. If they don't take, and if they take on c5, then you're really wrecking their structure with knight takes f5. Black would not want to play this kind of pawn structure. What else could black do? If they run with the bishop, then you can take on c6, and now you get to play b4 because the knights on c6 is no longer guarding the b4 square. And you can actually hold on to this. So yeah, so I'm going to stick with this d takes c5 move in the future. But I played c4. Okay, this is also good. e6, and then you can just take here, and then if e takes, you get into what is this, a Tarrasch or something, where I'm okay playing this. So for example, just regular takes bishop g5, and already black center is coming under some tremendous pressure. And I've played this in tournament games where I end up winning a pawn really early on, in fact. The problem is, and I think this is where I input that game by that 24-68 guy. It's really instructive. I find the problem for me is I often win that d5 pawn, but then black has such a flurry of activity that even if the engine says you're like +6, a +0.6 or +1 even, whatever, it's hard to convert that extra pawn, and I end up losing sometimes because I'm trying so hard to keep my extra pawn, but black has all the activity and gets a really active position. So this is the kind of position where I have to analyze or look at Grandmaster games and see how they would hold this kind of position as white, even with an extra pawn. But just back here, I think e takes, this game he played knight takes d5, not e takes. And here I played knight c3, which is very intuitive and it makes sense. White is a little bit better here, because the idea being, let's say he takes, b takes, and I've gotten the chance to bolster my center, right? I'm the one with the center pawn, d pawn. But I was looking at some other lines, and even in this line, this knight e5 idea here is very powerful, and I it's like in my blind spot. I don't even look at it. I don't even want to play it. I don't want to even think about it because it's such a messy looking move. But the only reason it's messy to me and it's in my blind spot and I don't even consider it as an option is because I'm not really understanding the logic of the position here. What is the logic? Why are we playing knight e5? Then it becomes less messy and you can understand it. The real idea is you're opening up this threat of e4. Then knight e5 just makes a lot of sense in principle. Like e4 is a huge threat, right? For example, I mean, I don't know, let's say they take this pawn like this. Now, the old me would have been like, okay, this is just too much to calculate. I don't want such a messy position. But no, what you're doing is you're threatening e4. Keeps things very simple. So knight takes d4 is ruled out. So if that's one move, big move already ruled out, I don't need to think about that. What about c takes? Well, then here, again, now you just take, and queen takes d4. Very simple. And white has a central presence, better position. Easy, nothing to think about there, right? So one of my threats with knight e5 is not just to play e4, but it's actually to take on c6 as well. Yeah, anyways. And so what else is left? Black's only option then is but white is threatening knight takes c6, and then the light squares are really fucked up. e4 is coming. So black pretty much has to take the knight, and if that's the case, well, now you've renewed the threat at e4, and let's say he gets out of this somehow with, let's say, this. well then the light squares becomes very weak. Like after queen b3, then you've got ideas to play knight c3, rook d1, who knows what, right? b7 is kind of in trouble right now. Now, in this kind of position, it's easy for me to go wrong over the board because I never know when to take that b7 pawn or not, or like, you know, but just to give an example, like it's not simple. Like, let's say black just guards the b7 pawn. My instinct would be to play rook d1, but this is already going astray a little bit. It's inaccurate because black has this beautiful move c4. So this is what I mean. Like white gets a good position, sometimes even up a pawn, but then black has also all this activity, and white can go wrong. For example, here, let's say I took that pawn, which is a mistake. Then rook c8, and look at all this activity. Let's say I want to keep the queen on an active square, so I go to d4, right? Then bishop c5 comes, and already white is getting chased around so much, and so it's not, white doesn't even really have an advantage anymore, it seems. So back here, of course, if you're an engine, like after c4, you would go queen f3, not letting black play rook c8. And here you've restored a lot of the pressure. So for example, I mean, I don't know, what is black going to do? I think you already have a threat of e4 because he's on a pin. So let's say he gets out of the pin with queen c7. Then knight c3, I guess, because b7 is weak. So takes, and now you're threatening to hit b7. So what would you do? Let's say he ignores it. You takes. Yeah. And this is, I'm just analyzing for myself because I find even if the engine says I'm +5 here, I still have trouble because how do you continue? So this is, you get the king out of there, you're threatening rook d7, bishop e3, and again here, like the engine recommends bishop e3, but over the board I'd be scared to play it because I would think, okay, rook b2 is coming and I'm in trouble, right? But the idea is, yes, the rook is on b2, but then it's like, how is black developing these pieces, right? He can't do anything about this. There's no g6, there's no f, none of that shit's working, which means I have time to play rook d7 and come around the back, maybe like rook a7 and rook to a8. And already black is having some issues. For example, let's say he went after the e2 pawn, then I think I could take on a7, and I'm already threatening rook a8 with devastating effects. Like let's say, yeah, this is just game. This is just over. I don't see him. Okay, yeah, no, nothing's working. Even king g8, I check bishop f8, then I have bishop c5. So this is this is game. All she wrote. Yeah. So, anyways, this is how 95 could have gone. But I didn't play 95 here, which is a very powerful move. In the future, now I'll be looking at 95 and trying to make it work in these positions. But I play knight c3, more intuitive, takes. And it's just a slight advantage for white, I guess, because you have the center pawn. Now here, again, I started going wrong because I didn't know how to continue. It's quite typical. So queen b3 is not necessarily bad, although in the future, I'm not going to, like, it's, okay, so let's say castles. So I played bishop b2 because, again, I didn't know what to do. But here, and like I said earlier, I never know when to take on b7 or not. But here it says to take on b7. So I guess you're hitting the knight or something. So the reason I didn't take is because I was worried about knight takes d4. And I thought, this is just equal pawns. And where's my advantage? And my queen's going to get kicked around. But already, there's a tactical way to play. And yeah, the engine is saying +6. But it's a very deep tactic. So I'm going to try and go through it without making the moves on the board. I looked at it earlier. So knight takes, queen takes, okay? Now already there, white could get a equalish kind of position, double-edged, by just taking the rook. Well, no, by playing bishop b2, kicking the queen, and then afterwards taking the rook on a8. Let me just put it on the board. So if I just played this way, or maybe bishop e3 instead of b2. I don't know which one. So let's say I played something like this, and the queen ran somewhere. Then I can take the rook, and this is, it looks good because you think you've got two rooks for the queen, but I'd put it at around equal because black is going to get some serious attacking chances with like h5, h4 and stuff. And I don't see my rooks, like it's hard to coordinate my rooks when black has two bishops on the board just controlling us so many squares. Queen is going to be pretty powerful, so this would be very double-edged. I wouldn't go for this, but here there's a very deep tactical idea. So takes, queen takes, and then we take on e7. And it looks weird because black is going to take the rook on a1. But then we take the rook on a8. Black takes the rook back, and it's just an equal position, which is why I would not even consider it. But then you have to think tactically what's going on. We have a queen sitting there on a1 vis-a-vis this rook on f1, which means this bishop can move with a discovered attack. Currently has nowhere to go with the discovered attack. But then you also have to think that a8 rook will be sitting there alone on just hanging. And so my queen is on e7, right? So if I hit the rook with the queen and I go to b7, where is that rook going? If it steps onto any dark square, like let's say d8 or f8, then this c1 bishop can go out to a3 or f4 and hit that rook, and I get to hit the queen as well. Okay, so let me put that on the board here. So this is actually white is winning here. After this takes, and this idea of queen b7, forcing the rook onto a dark square. It can try to hold on for a little bit and go to light square like e8, but then queen c6 is a really nice move because again, I put queen a7 because I was looking at this. I thought this is maybe how white wins. I take the extra pawn. But actually in this position, because there's opposite colored bishops, I was looking at some lines and it just seems like despite white having the extra pawn, white can't really do anything about it because even if we trade queens, um, engine ranks says equal. Because I guess you can't really control the opposite color complex with opposite color bishops like this. Although practically in a real game, I'd say heck, just go for it because it's very unlikely that someone sub 2000 is going to hold this as black. They're going to panic being a pawn down, and I might even be able to get a win here. But uh, this is not the way to win. The way to win is, let's say black tries to hold on with rook e8. You don't take on a7, you go queen c6. Although queen d7 apparently, rook a8, queen, no, queen c6 is the idea because it controls both a8 and e8 and c8, all the light squares. Kind of beautiful. It controls every single light square that the rook has access to, forcing the rook onto a dark square. After which the bishop moves with the double attack. So like this is a very advanced tactic, which I want to be able to spot in the future. But I played bishop e2, and here it's not like white really has anything objectively, but somehow I ended up getting something going because I got to push the d pawn forward, and this should not have happened. Like black had a lot of pressure on my a pawn. Earlier here, I'm kind of too tired to analyze exactly how black could have played. It would be very instructive for me to do so, but I've already gleaned enough lessons from this game that I just want to move on. But black did not have to go down this, and then here I just get that very powerful pass d pawn. But what I really want to look at is like the instructive endgame lessons in this game I pasted. Now I barely have the energy to go through it, but where is it? Here, this game right here. This was a game in a line that happened from the position I reached. Let me see where. This is instructive because both players went wrong in the end game, and in one of those cases, I kind of knew like a better defense. So this is a position after, right? I was looking, right. So here instead of knight takes, which was what happened in my game, I was talking about e takes. Then I get into that Tarrasch kind of position, and this is where I pasted in the game because this is an example how white can actually win an extra pawn. And then you have to be able to convert this like with good technique, despite black having a flurry of activities. How did this 2468 rated guy do this against a 2135? Okay, so he's white. This 2468 guy. So what did he do? So he played queen b5 here. So this is the kind of move where it's tough for me to go down this whole road, but it ended up working. So what is black doing? He's starting to take on c3. And I'd be scared because bishop takes knight, pawn takes, and queen takes, and it looks like black just won my pawn, right? Uh, but it doesn't actually work because then you have to think about this queen is overloaded there. It's holding onto the f5 bishop. So if black tries to win a pawn here, the queen can't take because the f5 bishop is hanging. And if it can't take there, then white has a lot of pressure on these light squares, and white is up a pawn, and he got to trade a little bit. And when he trades off that dark square bishop, then already white is making progress, right? So black took for some reason. But I guess, okay, what happens if he doesn't take? Like, last move he went here. So maybe this was not a good... I mean, Engine is saying it's a good move. I don't I guess he had to save that bishop somewhere, and he didn't want to go somewhere passive. Is my guess. Like, let's say he went bishop e7. I'm not really sure how white would continue here, but am I playing queen b5 anyways? Or what the heck? I actually don't know. But okay, engine is saying queen b5. So I'm hitting b7, but I think more so than that, I'm just kind of centralizing stuff. So let's say he played rook d8. Do I actually take on him? Yeah, see, it's not even saying that taking on b7 is necessarily that good, because he just goes here and then takes on b2 eventually. So what is queen b5 actually doing? I'm not really sure. Now that I'm looking at the engine lines, it seems you're vacating the queen from a square where it's not so well positioned, because rook d8 comes and hits that queen. The knight would rather go to d5. You want the rook on d1 controlling that line. So the queen is not well placed on d5. So I'm learning something. So queen b5, the real idea is not to take the b7 pawn, although it does massage it a little bit. But you're clearing the square for the knight to come to d5, or rook a d1, something like that. Okay, interesting. So bishop b4 here. Okay, now what did he play? He played rook a b8. Black, the 2135 rated guy. And then white played knight d4. I like this. He's posing all these trades that are yeah, make it easier for white to convert the extra pawn here. So then there, now he just trades everything. Now rook c8 I don't like, because now he played queen e5, but engine's saying +4 with knight e7. Why? Why is that the case? White is currently up a pawn, and if you play knight e7, queen takes, I can take on b7 next. Huh. But somehow he went queen e5. He's like, I'm already up a pawn, let's just trade stuff. And now, this is how the game went. Rook c4. Again, this is a very tough kind of position to convert, despite being up a pawn, because black is the one with all the activity. I've been in these kinds of positions many times from this kind of opening line, because I get it a lot. Rook d7. And here, white's rook is passive, so this is the first instructional thing for me, is that usually you want the rook to be behind the pawn, or whatever, not to the side, because the rook is very passive. But white has a way to kind of make the rook unpassive, which is so to think that rook b2 is just a passive rook move. You don't want to play it. That's dogmatic thinking, because here white can actually play something like e3, king somewhere, and get all the way over to b1, let's say. And then once the king is there, you free the rook to move around. Like, that's just one idea. So the rook on b2 is not necessarily permanently passive. To give another line here, I was thinking, like, by looking at the game, I didn't want my rook to be passive, so I thought instead of rook d7, why don't I play rook d3? And my idea was to bring the rook king to d2 to help support c3 pawn. So I went through this example line here. Let's say king f3. But this is another instructional moment for me, that black has so much activity. So already rook c5, and black is threatening to pick up an extra pawn with rook a4, rook c2, and rook a5 if I'm not careful. And I didn't think about this at all, so I just blindly played king e3, and already black has something like rook a4. Yeah, and now you're kind of just passively playing rook d2, or maybe you have to go after the b pawn, or I don't know what the heck you're doing, but black has so much activity now. So maybe back here, yeah, I don't know, man. So it's saying to play, and not just that, but here, even if he doesn't go for that, he can always play something like b5 in a lot of these lines. Like, let's say he played rook c2, b5, a5, or b4, and you're sitting in a pin there. Of course, here, tactically, white is getting out of this with c takes b4. And then you play rook a3 after that, I guess. Yeah, and you have a good active rook. Black is the one who's being passive there. But it's just, yeah, black has a lot of activity to give white problems. But here, you can go king f1 and still have the same idea of bringing the king all the way over. So just this example, just this idea of bringing the king over to the queen side. So even back here, when the rook gets passive like this on b2, Like, what did white do? He won the game in another way, which is not clean. Like you can see in a lot of these cases, the engine evaluation says black is equal. So this was not clean. Like instead of pushing my pawns on the king side, I think I would instead try to bring my king over to the king side with like because I just feel like black is if the more black is able to trade off these king side pawns, like the way it ended up, white was able to pick up the pawn, and then you've got these two connected passers versus the isolated pawn on the a pawn, and this is like a theoretical win anytime you have connected passers against one pawn like this. And that's another instructive thing because I know that in principle, but I've never actually had to play it with connected passers. So I would need to know exactly how to win the techniques. I'll look at it in a bit. But back here, I'm just wondering if white had another way to not allow black in the game, back in the game. Like I'm thinking if white just played like king d1 and like kind of just got the king over to the queen side. So let's take a look. Can I do that? Let's see. So let's say he played can I play, let's say, king d1 here? Although I'm also worried about the black king infiltrating and getting too active. There was one line I was looking at where white makes this happen. Not sure. This is the game itself. Let me just try and find that continuation. Maybe black's king gets too active with my idea. Maybe this is not good yet. If the king getting that active, this is not good. But let's say if the king was not active. No, so maybe. So where did white go wrong? Like, why does the engine say that black got in the game, back in the game in a lot of these? So h3, it doesn't like. I don't even know why. So already h4, g, f5, and this makes sense to me. Like black is able to trade off a lot of these pawns. So where did black go wrong here? He's playing this correctly, but here he went wrong with this h3 move. So what was his idea? I think the idea is that like once white takes here, he's got the connected passers, and then he just has to go and pick up the h pawn like this, and it's game over. So how can black deviate so that it doesn't make this possible? That either so that black holds on to the h pawn or that he doesn't allow the connected passers. So what would be the options? One option is so taking on g5, taking on instead of h3, if you take on g4, maybe this holds on to the h pawn in a better way. I'm not sure. Let's see. Like let's say rook takes king h5. Uh, right. And you see in this line, yes, white has the connected passers, but now you've retained the h pawn, giving black extra stuff to worry about. And so perhaps white really has nothing better than just to kind of a draw kind of repetition or something, because now the rook has to stay here and not let the king and pawn advance too far up the board. So let's say something like this, king h5, rook back to g5. You can see how this is already a repetition, because if the rook went anywhere else, then already h3, and the black pawn is making even more progress, right? Like let's say I went here, h3, and already black is climbing up the board. So then white kind of has to repeat. So that's one way. And the other way the engine's saying is rook a3, which I'm not sure what it does. Let's say king d4, rook a4. So I guess I'm just checking from these lateral checks, and white doesn't have a good way to get out of these lateral checks. So that's two ways black had to kind of make a draw here. But instead, the way he played with this h3 move, he lets white get the connected passers and take out the h pawn. So that is nothing to worry about. Okay, so that's instructive for me. So black can allow the connected passers as long as he gets to keep the h pawn. So don't push h3. Instead, you get the king to h5 here. Take and get the king to h5. And that h pawn is enough for white to worry about. But back here, then where did white go wrong? How could he have... Because he was doing all right, even though h3 was inaccurate. But here he had to take on... This just does not look right. This should be drawing, like... Because he's going to pick up the h pawn now, too. So king e2. Now I think the idea is that if black took that pawn, then white has rook d4 followed by... No, it's saying rook d7. But then aren't I able to defend the pawn? Okay, I know what white's gonna do. Anytime black pushes the pawn, white is gonna attack it from the side, I think. No. A5. Now I was thinking white should attack it from the side, but there's rook h5, and white is not winning after that. But he has rook a7, but then my question is, isn't black holding onto the pawn? And I know it's a very defensive way very passive way to hold onto the pawn. I think, how is white gonna win this? Why is the engine saying it's so good for white? Wait, rook d5, a6. I don't understand. Rook c6. I'm just going through some example moves because I have no idea how white's gonna win this. Like, isn't black just coming over here and picking up everything? No, it takes on f6. It's a here. I don't know, man. It's like I can't concretely put my finger on like how white wins this, but somehow it's like just a combination of moving the king over to the queen side and trying to keep these pawns like keeping these pawns from being taken, and white somehow wins this game. It's a very strange thing that's kind of over my head a little bit here. So, but still, it's like that's a very tough way for white to win. Is there an easier way? Like, so it seemed this h3 move allowed h5 and h4, after which black is getting some favorable trades in. So instead of h3, is there anything else I can do? I think the idea is to keep your pawns back and move with the king instead somewhere. Make progress with the king. So let's say now h5, king d5, and let's say try something like this. Here you can just take it, king h5. I think king... And you're just making a lot of progress with the king, it seems like. Let's say takes, king e7. Or let's say, so maybe not h4, no, it's not possible. So if that h4 is not possible, then black is forced to be very passive here. Like let's say king 7. Yeah. C5. But where is the white king going? I'm very curious. Where's the white king going here? b4, a6, a4. Right, okay. So by going through these moves, I kind of got an idea of a sense of how white can win this game without allowing all the bullshit. In the game, white made the mistake of pushing the kingside pawns, which allowed some bullshit, because now after h5, h4, black is playing this correctly, he's getting some favorable trades, and it's hard for white to hold on to everything. Instead, white should not even care about pushing the pawns yet, and just realize that this black rook is very short of squares. It has to stay on the a file, but it only has access to like 4 squares. So if you can get your king all the way here somewhere, right, then you push the a pawn forward, and the rook is hard pressed to stay on the a file. And once it leaves, then you can go and round up that a pawn, maybe with like rook d7 or something. And this king cannot go too far up the board, because then this king can actually go and harass these pawns from the back. So white just had to keep these pawns back here. It's a very instructive endgame lesson here, but there's one more very instructive endgame lesson I want to show. This is something I'm proud of, because I made those endgame videos on this YouTube channel, and it helped me evaluate the position correctly here. So somewhere here, I'm not even sure why, but white goes wrong. Like, he has these connected passers which should be winning at some point here. So here, it says white is winning here somehow. But then somehow, in a weird way, all of a sudden it's like a draw. And I don't even understand how or why. I really don't know why. So this is something I'll have to analyze in the future, but I'm kind of tired to analyze this right now. But the point I want to get to is here somewhere, where white actually loses one of the pawns. Okay? Now this should be a draw, so technically black, this 21-35 rated guy, should be able to make an easy draw here. This is a fillet or gone bad position, and he opts for the wrong defense. He went rook e8 here, which is a passive defense with a bishop pawn, which theoretically, like I just know this is a win for white because I made those YouTube videos on this. Covered this in like less than a minute. Because the rook always has that swing around. Like he'll go rook a7, h7, whatever, and then rook h8. Like it's a win for white. If this pawn was a g pawn or an h pawn, then black can hold this with a passive defense with the king and rook on the back rank. But here, white's threat is to checkmate black on the back rank, and this is a fillet or gone bad position, where black can still make a draw by going to the short side of the board with king g8. And the idea is this rook can actually come here and harass the king from the sides. So white's winning mechanism here would be rook h8. Of course, a8. Of course, he's not winning, but this is one try for to a win. Like I remember this from Dvorsky's manual. Rook f1, f8, and now the king will come out and he'll march the pawn forward. The thing is, the black rook just goes somewhere on the side, b7 or b3 or a3, whatever. And now there's white cannot make progress because he cannot defend against these checks from the side. There's just no cover for the king. Now I'm just looking. Can possibly white? This doesn't make sense. But just king g7. Yeah, there's just no cover for the king from the side checks. So black could have made a very easy draw here. You don't even have to think about this. It's just theoretical. Like if you've covered, looked at Dvorsky's endgame manual, but he did not find. He just went for the opposite of the passive defense and ended up losing this game, which is very sad. See what I was talking about, this rook swing over, because king g8 here, and the rook swings over to this other side and white's winning. So just one thing left in this game which could be super instructive to me is why do these connected passers win at one point and then don't win at another point? I don't know if I have the energy to cover this right now. Just give me like a 30-second break. Let me see if it's even recording on YouTube. Yeah, it says it's live. Okay. One thing left in this game which could be super instructive. Alright. Let me take a short break because this is a lot to analyze here. I need to figure out why these connected passers are winning at one point and then drawing at another point after just one silly move like rook, beef. Yeah, give me a short break. Alright, where was that point where the engine's evaluation suddenly shifts? Because theoretically, it's like this should just be better winning for white because you have connected passers. So what is that qualification? Why is this a draw now? So engine recommends rook h6 or even e4 or something. Okay, and what's the idea? Big idea. Let's say the king runs back, and I go rook a6 or e4, let's say. Okay, and I'm making progress. So then, isn't this also making progress? He would go a4. Now if I go e4, a3. Now black's the one who's winning because he got that check with the promotion, so white has to be careful here. Which means now I'm forced to come back here somewhere. And I can't go to e2 because then rook h1 wins. Sorry, rook h1. Which means I'm forced to go to g2 so that there's no rook swing around here. But then this is a very passive way for white to play. So king f6, just making it so that I cannot make any progress at all. And the king cannot leave. If it steps forward, like let's say go to g3 or f3, there's rook g1 followed check followed by promoting. Cannot go to f2 because there's rook h1 followed by rook h2 with the skewer. So here, this makes sense to me that why this would be a draw for why white cannot make progress. So then how could white have avoided this? Which means all the way back here, first of all, I need when the black's pawn gets to a2, that means my king needs to be in front of the pawn, so there's no check. That could be one possible way of winning, I think. What else could stop this? Yeah, I think that's pretty much the only. Let me think here. But it's like I don't get it. Why isn't that still possible? Like if I go through the engine line, why is this winning then? Like, why can't I just keep pushing this stuff? So one thing that white did in this line is that because he cut off the king, um, with rook h6, if the king tries to stay forward, well then he's either getting checkmated with e4, or he's getting pushed out completely to the side. And now with the rook on the a file, these pawns have a free run to go forward, even by themselves. The king is not even needed because the king is not in front of the pawns. So rook a6, h6 is clever for that reason. But then what if the king just stays in front this way? Am I just going to repeat that theme or what? So let's say I play e4, he tries pushing the pawn. So here black is ready to play that check followed by promoting, so which means I have to put my king in front of the pawn. Rook king f5. So as I'm looking at these moves, it's so easy the way white wins. Just white had to be careful about a couple of things, like not allowing the check, so putting the king in front of the pawn at the right time. And then second, yeah, a couple of these themes I've learned, but then my question is still, why is rook b5 so bad? Why can't white do all these same things? Like let's say I played here, yeah, like why isn't white able to do the exact same thing here? Why can't I just go here? Okay, so the idea is now rook e1, hitting this pawn and letting me make progress. Like if I try and save the pawn, now this is black is crushing. And I can't afford to give up the pawn either, right? So what is wrong with this b5 move? So for some reason here, king e4 is flawed because now when I try to make progress, which means another thing to look, fuck, what am I doing here? Another thing to look out for is anytime I try to make progress too quickly with the king, if I leave any one of these pawns unprotected, that gives black a chance to bring the rook out once the pawn is sufficiently advanced. And then he gets to like kind of trade that pawn for this one kind of thing even. So that's another thing to watch out for. But okay, why can't, and if I push both pawns, then the problem is now my king has no shelter, as we saw, because I have no shelter from the checks from the back. But then okay, why can't I still gain shelter with rook check and then king this way and this way? Why am I just too late to do that or what? Like king f7, and let's say I went here. Now it says black is winning. Okay, because I'm actually, my rook is not on the a file, so right. Okay, so I'm starting to piece together why this move is so bad. A few reasons, okay? Number one, fuck, it's tiring. Okay. When this pawn gets to, let's say, a3, my rook must be behind the pawn. Otherwise, black has like a couple of moves to do some shit, like whether it's check or hitting a pawn, then pushing the pawn to a2, and then a1 is coming and there's nothing I can do to stop it. It's like white is just short two moves always. So first thing white's priority should be is let's get that pawn behind, like that. I know the engine is saying e4 and stuff, but even if I played rook a6, there's no way white is losing. Like, there's no way white is not winning this, even if it's not the most accurate way forward. You want that pawn behind the pawn as fast as possible, so that now black only has one move, that check, followed by the promotion. If the pawn is on a3, the rook cannot move for out. Whereas if the rook is on b5, let's say, the rook can move out, and even if the pawn is on a3, still black wins because he has that extra move of a2 followed by a1, and the rook is not on the a file. Okay, so that's one key there. The other key is even if I don't put the rook behind the pawn, like there are other lines here as well. Like let's say I played e4, h6. Let's see, try to keep the king behind the pawn. King g4, a3. So I think this is the key. When that pawn reaches the a3, that's when you absolutely must put the rook on a6, or of course you get the king out of the check completely, and then white's winning. But in the game, white, so this is amazing. This is a 2468 rated player, and he played this inaccurately. He played the move rook b5, which it doesn't get the king out of the check. It doesn't do anything about pushing the king back or whatever. It doesn't put the rook behind the pawn. So it seems it's a matter of tempos. Like it doesn't look like it, but white has wasted a very valuable tempo. Like now white tries to make progress, and it's just he's a tempo short. It's a very hard to whatever. I'm gonna stop there. So instead of trying to concretely know why rook b5 is bad, like only a computer is gonna be able to figure out the exact tempos why. I think just in principle, it's a move that doesn't do the right things, and that's why you shouldn't play it, and just avoid like risking the game of tempos. Like like here, be on the safe side, just put the king, rook behind the pawn with the check, or you play e4 in conjunction with rook h6, and then put the king on f5. Not e4, but oops. You want the king to be here so that it's sheltered from the checks, and you want the pawn on e4 so that both pawns are protected by the king. Because you noticed king e4 ostensibly does the same thing. You think, okay, I'm getting out of the checks, but the problem now is that the only way for white to, of course, Engine is saying that white's still winning, but still in principle, the only way for white to progress is to play king f5, which will leave the e pawn hanging. Okay, which is not a problem if the rook is on a6, but if the rook is on b5, like white played, okay, and now you try to do this thing, and let's say you played king f5, you're not working because you're leaving the e pawn hanging. This wouldn't work for black if the rook was on a6, because white could take that pawn, but because the rook is not on a6, black has these additional chances. And again, this will not happen if the pawn was on e4, which is why the engine kept recommending e4, because then both pawns would be protected by the king. All right, so by analyzing it, I kind of came up with a lot of keys to help me orient myself in these positions in the future. Just to recap here, very quickly, I know you guys are probably tired. I'm tired. White made one mistake of pushing the h pawn. He should leave those pawns alone and just march the king over to the queen side, because this rook cannot stay on the a file. It's running out of squares. King just has to go there and hit the rook. Then white wins. Don't Once you play h3, black gets an extra hook to trade off these pawns. Second thing was the connected passers are winning, but we covered all those keys why white should either, yeah, I'm not going to cover it again. Third thing is black could have actually made a draw here by not letting the h-pawn go. With the pawn on h3, it's too easy for white to pick up that h-pawn, and these connected passers are just an easy rolling win. But if he keeps the h-pawn on h4, that allows the king to come to h5 and actually hold onto the pawn, after which white has nothing better than repetition. Otherwise, the pawn and king duel will just keep marching up the board. That's the other thing. And lastly, that passive defense black went into, that's something I recognize, and I'm kind of happy that I had that endgame knowledge. If I was defending this black, there's no way I would enter the passive defense there with rook e8. This is just a book win for white. Instead, I also know the Philidor gone bad position. It's a theoretical position. Play king g8, go to the short side, leaving the rook open for lateral checks on the long side of the board. And this is a draw. Yeah, very instructive endgame. We'll leave it at that. Thanks, guys.